Excellent, and good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Journey NYC podcast. Jesse.
What's up, dude?
How's it going?
Going really well.
Amazing. I'm super excited because we are here with episode 3.
Yes, we are.
We actually have a live guest today, so
Yes, we do.
we don't have to worry about Skype or any of these other technical things that we had to the last time.
This guy right over here.
Oh, wait. Someone's here?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh yeah.
Right
And
next
we're
to you.
videoing because we actually, our first guest, Paul Castle from Paul Castle Studios, which is on Instagram, who designed our logo, actually did our backdrop. So if you're actually watching us on video, we actually now have our new logo up there. But since we do have someone here, we actually have a guest today.
Yes, we do.
Do you know who that is?
That'd be Rick Richey.
Rick Richey.
That's fun to say.
That sounds like a comic
It's fun to
book.
say.
Rick Richey, welcome to the Journey NYC podcast. How's it going?
Hey, what's up? It's going well, man. Thank you. Good to see you.
Amazing. How do you know Rick, Jesse?
I met Rick at Independent Training Studios.
Oh, he's that landlord dude, right?
He is.
I knew it. He has an
He's
empire
the landlord.
apparently.
He
Yeah,
has
I know.
an empire of fitness.
Yes.
I know him because I pay him.
Exactly. Rick, so
Hey.
I have known you now for years. When we started at a company, and then we moved to a company. Before you became the mecca of all independent trainers around New York City, and now about recovery. But so Rick actually has been in the industry forever, and he is a global presenter for NASM, if I'm not mistaken. And then you also own 3 locations of Independent Training Spot, where trainers actually work and rent space from you. You provide a really great community for them. And then now you have your latest venture, which is called Recover.
Yeah.
Very high tech.
It is high tech.
You need to tell us about it.
We're going high tech with recovery. I think for a long time because as a licensed massage therapist, also having the opportunity to work with athletes on a really high level.
Nice.
And they show up to work with them, and they have the coolest technology. And I'm like, I want to do that. But NBA players that would come, like their leg sleeves would go up to my chin. And I'm like, I don't know if I could use that one.
It's a body sleeve.
It is. Let me out. So, that's kind of how it started, having the opportunity, like when we started as trainers, the new thing and the only kind of self-care and recovery you could do yourself
Foam roller.
was a foam roller.
Yeah.
And it was white then.
Yeah, and it was foam.
It was like,
Yeah,
it was like a floaty in the,
Yeah,
in the
it was
pool.
basically
Basically
like
a
a
floaty.
pool noodle.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I remember those.
Yeah.
And I also remember being at some of the gyms that would have a pool, and people would take the foam rollers to the pool because they didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I never
things
had
have
a
changed.
gym with a pool.
For sure. Things have changed. So it's good that you see, and the expectation now is you go into a gym and you see a foam roller, you see some type of self-care. Percussion therapy is really popular now, where it's like the things
Theragun
that hammer you,
yeah.
right? So, Theragun, Hypervolt, these are...
Hyper ice, all of the ball. Yeah.
Correct, yeah. So...
Did I ever tell you
Do
that
those work, by the way? Sorry.
Yeah.
But do those work?
Yeah, there's some research coming out right now. So the IRB and the research has been done. They're just waiting for the study to be published, and then we'll get a better idea on what the information says.
Gotcha.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I actually know a guy who actually took one of those like Black & Decker saws and modified it
Yeah.
to make his own, because he refused to pay like whatever Theragun was.
Yeah. Well, I
It
think
is the
that's why-
loudest thing ever.
G1 of Theragun? Were you there for that?
Yeah, that was loud too.
Yeah. You knew when someone
Yeah, he was
sparked
using
that
it.
thing on. It
Yeah.
was like
You were
gasoline
like,
run.
could you keep it down the street, please? Is
Anyway.
that construction? No,
Yeah.
no, it's sort of,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
the one doing body work.
Yeah, exactly. So what exactly does Recover do?
So Recover is a place where it's really designed as a stress management facility for orthopedic and cognitive stress. And what most kind of
What does that mean?
recovery places, whether they're physical therapy and they have some other modalities or chiro or whatever, they might have some modalities. This is a place where we only use the technology and we're not just focusing on physical recovery. So when people come in, kind of get a little bit more information from them. Like, so did you tweak your ankle? Are you sore muscularly? Are you just fatigued? Or do you have stress and anxiety? Are there cognitive things going on? Are you jet lagged? Like, there are a lot of things that there's mental cognitive stress, and we use some modalities that deal with both of those. So it can deal with helping your body, or it can help your mind. And the good news is, and what we like to do is we compartmentalize everything.
Yeah.
Oh, this is good for your brain, and it can only be your brain that it's good for. This is good for your heart health, and it's only good for heart health. But the body is a system.
Yeah.
And so when you treat your body well, your brain responds. Like if you've gone to get a massage, like you ain't mad after a massage, right? Like your body feels good, and then you're in a better place.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about the parasympathetic nervous system, so we get more parasympathetic dominant, but also if we get a modality that we might utilize that puts you in a parasympathetic state, cognitively, your body will also start to react to that. So we use technology. So it's not come in and we don't have massage therapists there. And our initial model did. Okay. So we were going to have, massage therapist and stretch therapy and percussion therapy. So somebody could do all of that to you. And then we realized the human capital that goes into that. And then the simple model of let's plug and play so that we could potentially brand that and expand that as a business. And it's going well.
Very cool.
Thank you.
So interestingly enough, this is not a fitness podcast, which Rick does a ton of. I've been following you all over the place and listening to you all over the place. Interestingly enough, is with the Journey NYC is, if you don't know anything about it, this was Jesse's brainchild. He came up with this idea and he goes, we really need to talk to real people about real shit. And I was like, well, what does that mean?
Right.
And you said?
Well, it's basically, we see a lot of people talking about celebrity, and we see a lot of people talking about kind of being under a big spotlight and living a life that's really not what a normal person goes through. And I think it's fascinating to learn how people that aren't in the spotlight all the time get through changes in their life, struggles that they might have, experiences that they might be learning from on a day-to-day basis, and how that works, like for normal people.
I think that is a very good look. And so basically what you're saying is it is not my celebrity status that brought me here.
Yeah.
In part.
I knew it. I knew this was too good to be true.
Anyway. Well, and
thank you. By the way, let me just throw that in there. It's a wonderful idea that everybody's got a story, right? And usually the only people that get to put it out there are people that already have traction behind it anyway.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Everybody's got a story to share. Everybody's got an obstacle or hurdle to overcome. And it's nice to hear that you're not the only one.
Yeah.
Right. And when somebody else does it, it's either commiseration or hope, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I feel your pain, but if I feel your pain and see that you've done something that has allowed you to progress with it, through it, beyond it, there are a lot of iterations of that, then it can provide hope for people.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that Jesse always brought up, and he was really great at laying out for us, was, we all, I think at different points in our lives as we come up to challenges, hills, hiccups, whatever you want to call it, bumps in the road, speed bumps that are sometimes not just speed bumps.
Yeah. And
then a lot of it comes down to, like, how do we deal with it? What have we done? How did you approach it? And then what has life been like afterwards? And that's sort of what we talk about here with the Journey NYC. And I've known you for a while, and I know that you've had some really interesting things. I've known you before you were married. Yeah. I've known you before you had kids. Mm-hmm. I've known you before you were my landlord. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Anyway. So why don't we start, like, what was life like before, we've chatted a little bit, so I already know what the catalyst was, but what was life like before all of that? Take us back to what life was before. So as somebody that works as a celebrity. Right. As someone super famous. You're welcome. All right. So as someone that has
been in the fitness industry. I started in 2002 as a personal trainer. And before that, and through that time, I was a martial artist. I was a gymnast, Chinese acrobatics. I did a lot of very wonderful physical things. And in high school, I was a pole vaulter. That's weird, but that's a real thing that people do. You just never know anybody who actually does that. Being physically active was important to me. As a matter of fact, even in my fighting career, I fought competitively for several years. And so there were the stresses and struggles of weight cutting or weight gaining to get into a different weight class, training for a fight, all of those things. And I had a pretty physically rigorous life and a life that I loved, right? Like being a trainer, cool gig, right? It's a fun job. When I became a manager, not long after I became a trainer, this was when you and I had met, and we became fast friends because you're easy to become fast friends with. And so,
they were just saying that I'm super anal retentive.
Right. Actually, you said that.
Right.
Yeah. See.
No, but what I'm saying is, you're like, if you say something like, "Man, I sure am thirsty," and Anthony is like 3 rooms away. He was like, "Do you want sugar with your coffee? Do you want cream in your?" I'm like, "How did you know? Did he hear that?" So he's just super willing to please, but that anal retentiveness too, as a manager, is very valuable for a company, right? So there were things that were great. When we met, we were fast friends. It was a wonderful, an ongoing relationship that we've known each other.
Doug Hatton was teaching us.
Oh man, that's great. I still
throwback.
Yeah, throwback, and much respect for him and what he did. And then I would teach. I became an educator, and as an educator, I would make these statements, and these statements seem now to me to be perhaps a little insensitive, because I am the person my pathology is the person I was speaking against.
Okay.
And I would say things like, healthy lifestyle, eat right, and exercise. It is the magic pill. And let's be honest, in many senses, it is.
It is.
Right? And we would say, if you eat well and you exercise regularly, then you can help stave off things like heart disease, some cancers, some strokes, diabetes, cognition diseases, things like that. And one day, in 2015, I'd gone to the doctor for a checkup, and the doctor just said, "Oh, this is weird. Like, your blood work's a little weird when it came back." And I was like, "What do you mean weird?" And I'm freaking out. Like, are there, cancer, or you know what I mean? Like,
what year is this?
2015 is this kind of first movement of the conversation. Okay. And this was it. Your A1Cs are 5. And I was like, "Is that bad?" And they were like, "No, not like for a normal person. Like an A1C below 5, around 5 is okay. It's weird that your A1Cs are at 5. Sure. So an A1C is kind of it's a blood projection of how they diagnose diabetes. Okay. And it is a number of 7, which becomes a very distinct diagnosis for diabetes. So I wasn't quite pre-diabetic yet, but they were concerned, and they were kind of threw that word out there a couple of times. And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I stopped putting sugar in my coffee, right? Or I stopped putting International Delight, that cream and sugar concoction.
That's the good stuff.
It's so good. It's so good. But you know what NSYNC said? Bye, bye, bye. Yeah. So it is gone. It's not in there anymore. And then came back the next year, and my A1Cs are at 6. And I was like, "That's weird. That's weird." And then I came back the next year. So again, in November, every year, going back for my checkup, and my A1Cs were at 7.
Wow.
And they were like, this is serious. This is a big deal. And for me, that was crazy. I was like, I refuse. I will not accept this diagnosis. I won't. I'm going to go work out more. I'm going to go eat better. I'm going to go drink more black coffee, because I'm not giving that up. Yeah. Right. But I'm going to go do all of these things more. And she was concerned. My doctor was concerned. She was like, I don't think that's the issue.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I came back 4 months later. And remember, this is year by year by year that I've come back, and it's gone up from 5 to 6 and 6 to 7. And then 4 months later from 7 to 13.
Whoa.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Meanwhile, I have no idea what these numbers mean, but I know 6 to 7 to 13 seems like a lot.
when they were concerned about 5 to 6,
Yeah, exactly.
and concerned about 6 to 7,
Exactly.
when that number almost doubles,
Right.
then that was a huge scare. So here's
Right.
what I said. When I was at 7 and she was trying to diagnose me with diabetes, and I was like, no, it was just October 31st. I've been taxing the kids' candy a little bit,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, oh, there are 2 Twixes in that bag. You got to
Right.
give one to me, right? So I'm putting the tax on there, and I I'm eating some of the candy, and she was like, that's not what an A1C is. That's what your blood sugar, when you take your blood sugar and prick your finger and test it, that will show quickly. That's a blood sugar number, blood glucose level. A1C is over the course of 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And so you can eat cake the day before, and it may or may not affect your A1Cs. Kind of like if you do an exercise today, that may or may not help your fitness level over the course of the next 3 months. So that's what they're looking at. The A1C is how sugar crystallizes on your blood. So how much sugar stays in the bloodstream and then crystallizes onto the blood. And that's the measurement.
Okay.
Okay. So is that type 1 or type 2?
So this is what was really concerning is they didn't know. They didn't know. So usually what people think of is type 1 happens when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's an autoimmune disease.
Okay.
So when I spoke with the endocrinologist, she was like, that's not true. She goes, an autoimmune disease doesn't decide just because you're 6 you get this, or it says, oh, you're 40. You know, you can't get it. I decide that you've made it to 40 and we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not the case. So she was, everybody at that point thought this guy is type 1 diabetic. Mm-hmm. But they didn't know at first, so they put me on 500 milligrams of metformin. My GP, because I couldn't get in to see an endocrinologist for like 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
That's crazy.
And then I kept coming back to the doctor, and the doctor did a wonderful job. Dr. Land on 86th Street in Upper West Side. She really went to bat for me to get me in to see someone, because she goes, not my wheelhouse. Like, she's an internist, general practitioner.
Yeah.
She's just not my wheelhouse. Let me facilitate this more. And so she got me in, and to someone that accepted my insurance, which is always a hard find.
Yeah, exactly.
And she was wonderful as a great doctor, and again, treated it like type 1 diabetes until they did more blood work. And then they brought me back in to do more blood work. And then they brought me back in a 3rd time there, which is a 4th time overall, to do blood work. And I was at a conference in Phoenix with NASM. Yeah. And I got a phone call from the doctor, and she said, you're type 2. She goes, I don't know. There's got to be an asterisk or a caveat or something there, but all of your blood work is pointing towards type 2. You've got, and you're always trying to figure out what happened. Does somebody in your family have diabetes?
Sure,
and I said, I had a great grandparent that had diabetes, that was in a wheelchair. And I don't know what kind of diabetes she had. I don't know where that was. I never met her.
Yeah.
I know my mom has Hashimoto's, and without batting an eye, the endocrinologist goes, well, you have Hashimoto's. And I went, what? What do you mean? Why is that like a byproduct of, why did you just say that so flatly? That's a big deal, right? And she goes, no, diabetes is. And I went, okay, all right, let's put Hashimoto's to the side. I'm not worried about Hashimoto's anymore. I'm worried about strictly diabetes, but another punch in the gut, right? There's something else there.
And while you're not at home.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So, this might be getting too far in the weeds, but just out of curiosity, what's the difference between type 1 and type 2? Like, why would it need to be? Because I thought you just took insulin and then it would basically you monitor your blood glucose levels, and that's how you manage it. But is there a difference in how you manage it between 1 and 2?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it should probably be asked more and clarity around those two things. So being an autoimmune disease, type 1 diabetes is when your beta cells in your pancreas no longer are producing insulin. So
Okay.
they are non-insulin producing. There are some beta cell antibodies in my blood.
Sure.
But I'm not a type 1 diabetic. So same thing. Like you may have some, we all have kind of some antigens in our body that or antibodies that are sometimes just attacking things in our system. And that's not unheard of, but it's to a very low degree. On the other hand, type 2 diabetic, which used to be called adult onset diabetes, which now is not referred to that because so many of our youth have this. And I will now speak to this the way I spoke to it in the past, pre-diagnosis with this same pathology. Type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle disease.
Okay.
It is a disease of being sedentary, a disease of poor eating habits, and a disease of very little movement or exercise. So we tend to have a high sugar diet and then not enough movement to metabolize those sugars. So the sugars will stay in the blood, and it's what ends up happening is, have you ever had a dog?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a little dog right now. His name's Rocky. When I come home, Rocky is bonkers. So he's a multi-poo. Designer breed.
So that's
to
because you're
add to my
famous.
celebrity. Everybody listening's like, I don't know you. So neither do like half my family members. So when I walk in, Rocky is crazy. Jumping, and I can close the door. And I come right back in, and he jumps. And I'll close the door, and I can do it again. And after 3, 4, 5 times, he was like, I'm not really that interested in it. Right? Like, this is a weird game I don't want to play. So I describe type 2 diabetes with sugar. So sugar gets into your system, whether it's through carbohydrates, because all carbohydrates will break down to a sort of sugar. And so that within the bloodstream, we release a hormone called insulin. And insulin is like a key that opens the lock, where I can get into that door to see Rocky, opens the lock so that muscles can absorb insulin into them. Sugar into them. And blood sugar is stored as glycogen in a muscle. So they're your glycogen stores. Otherwise, there's just free-floating glucose within the system. So if you do that too many times, Rocky just becomes disinterested. Or what we will say is there's an insensitivity or a tolerance to it. So when the sugars keep coming and the insulin keeps knocking on the door, the dogs stop barking. They don't care anymore. They're not interested in what you have to offer. So the great thing about exercise is exercise can increase insulin sensitivity. So when people get sugar into their system, then if they're regular exercisers, there tends to be the ability to become more sensitive to that insulin, and the insulin then allows the sugar to go into the muscle. I guess the strange part about this is, in the grand scheme of things, I am diagnosed with a lifestyle disease with a relatively healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
So relatively fit, relatively regular exerciser, relatively clean or healthy diet. And I would say, in contrast to the standard American diet, or SAD for short, incredibly clean, but I like things like cereal.
Sure.
Right. Breakfast cereal. I was a kid doing, the candy kind of cereal, but as an adult, like, give me an adult cereal. I'm super excited about it.
Yep.
Like I love cereal and I love sandwiches, but I wouldn't call that carb loading. You know what I mean? So what's going on is, I think it's still an anomaly, but what it's done for me as a fitness educator is try to be more sensitive in the way that I speak it, and not speaking to things in total absolutes. Thank you. So not speaking in absolutes, where if somebody does have a heart disease, you don't want to be the person who's going, well, if you eat right and exercise, that won't happen. Well, that's not necessarily true.
Sure.
And the same thing goes with type 2 diabetes now, I suppose. And it never crossed my mind that anybody could ever have that while still having a relatively healthy, active lifestyle and diet. And so that was shocking to me. So there's the difference then. when you're type 1 diabetic, by the way, you're
insulin dependent.
You're insulin dependent, which means before, I think, 1920, it is a death sentence.
Right.
So 1920, I think, is around the time they created an insulin injection. So if a type 1 diabetic, it's almost, I mean, it's not almost, it's worse. Like, that's a dangerous one to have.
Right.
I'm not going to go into an insulin shock, or I'm not going to go low blood sugar and pass out.
Yeah.
And potentially worse.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is a very scary moment. And I was treated as a type 1 diabetic for about 3 months before the full diagnosis came out. And I had like just these highs and lows, what's my blood sugar right now? Did I eat yet? Let me inject some insulin. And it wasn't much. Like, I would do about 5 units. So just a very little bit of insulin. You know, the little things where you go,
yeah,
and only be 5 of them. And I would inject myself. And I remember there was a UFC fighter, former UFC fighter, that came to recover. And I was so excited that Jake Shields was coming to recover for treatment. I was like, oh, Jake Shields, what? It's so exciting. And I had taken some insulin before he'd gotten there because I had eaten something. And when he showed up, I was like, yo, what's up, man? How's it going? Drop. Like, my face kind of went down. And I'm trying to be cool, right? So I'm going to let so-and-so show you around. And I walked towards the stairs and crawled down the stairs and made my way to Gregory's and to get a pastry to get my blood sugar back up. And I thought, this is got to be what death feels like. And when I took my blood sugar after I'd eaten it and got back upstairs, my blood sugar was at 54, which is really low. It is really low. So some people listening to this podcast will hear that number and be like, that's not good. It's not. And so it was borderline fainting. And remember, that's where I was after I had just put something into my system. So
wow,
that's why type 1 diabetics are the ones that need to have like sugar on hand.
Yeah.
Type 2 diabetics need to have sugar away from hand.
Away from hand.
Got it.
Yeah, my grandfather always had a handful of Toll House chocolate chip cookies. Or the chips.
And you were like, type 1 diabetes is awesome.
You'd have like a few Hershey Kisses, and you'd be like, it's for my diabetes. You'd be like, I want diabetes.
Wow.
Can I get some of that?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So as an educator, I mean, if you think about it, it's to get that kind of diagnosis is literally a kick and a punch in the gut.
Yeah, it was tough, man.
So, okay, you're away from home. You get this diagnosis. We've already traveled now through 3 to 4 months where they're traumatically treating you incorrectly. Now they change your diagnosis. How did that affect your psyche? I mean, as an educator, how did that affect the way you thought, the way that you approached it, health and wellness in general? And then where did you get, because you also have kids, it's like, and a family, it's like, how does all of that affect all of that?
There's a lot of fear in
Sure.
the answers to those questions. One of them particularly is after I got the real diagnosis and not even the real diagnosis, but going from 7 and me refusing that diagnosis to going to 13, where I was like, okay, there's no way out. And you saw me during that 4-month window.
Yeah. I remember that you were really thin.
I lost about 30 pounds.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a big guy anyway. So I'm 5'8", and at the time, I weighed 160 to 165, kind of floating weight there. So when I dropped to 135,
wow,
that was a big deal. But I didn't notice it at first because I was trying to get my weight down. I was working out more. I was time-restricted feeding. So there were a lot of things where I'm like, oh, I'm losing weight. Oh, I see some abs again. All right. And what I didn't notice, it took me a while to, is that I was losing a lot of weight and my clothes were really baggy on me.
I remember that.
Yeah, and you were one of the people that said something about my clothes being, you were like, your clothes are baggy on you, you lost a lot of weight. And I was like, yeah, I'm working out and trying to play it off. But what I also didn't realize, and it took me a moment to understand, so this is kind of the the morphology of what happened when in those 4-month periods is I got the flu. And it was after the flu that there was a rapid decline. And I thought that my eyesight was blurry because when I had the flu for a week, I was sitting in a bedroom that was basically dark, looking at my phone for hours upon end because I was sick and I didn't want to move my body. It wasn't until my back was aching from lying down too much that I could pull myself up. Like I was really sick. But my eyesight stayed blurry. And I was like, man, this stupid thing, got the flu, and I stared at the screen too much. And I found water to be like liquid gold. I loved water. I'm not a real big water drinker. I loved water. And I was like, what's happening? This is amazing. But I also was getting up to pee 5 times a night. And before I would lie down, I would go get more water, knowing that I would have to get up again and pee. But I craved water. All right. So here are some telltale signs of not having just turned 40, of having been undiagnosed or refusing the diagnosis of being diabetic. Eyesight gets blurry, the need for water because your body's trying to dilute the blood and move that out. And so diabetes it literally means sweet pee. I don't know how people figured that out, but the urine
that is not something
I did not know that.
It's like sugar pee, right? So we're trying to eject the sugar.
Not to be mistaken with the food group sugar.
Yeah, it's not that sugar pee. It's not that sugar pee. What are you peeing out? That's weird.
That's weird. Sweet pee.
So I had.
Is that where sweet pea comes from?
Yeah. It's the golden look of sweet peas. No. So all of this kind of culminated to a point where I went back in and got the real diagnosis. They were treating me as type 1 because they didn't know. Type 2 didn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. So they treated me as type 1. But in my mind, I'm thinking mortality now. Like, how long am I going to live with this diagnosis? I don't know. I haven't paid attention. Even with the pre-diabetes, I was like, that's not even something for me to worry about that much. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And each year, as it incrementally got worse, I was like, well, I will incrementally eject sugar from my body, right? So to go back into the questions that you're asking, like, what was the effect that had on me? And I will definitely say, when I called my wife that day and told her, we were in the middle of trying to get kids to where they needed to be in school and all that stuff. Wow. Okay. And she needed me to get back to help get one of the kids. And I told her that I got diagnosed with diabetes. And she goes, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. When are you going to be able to get back home? Because we got to get so-and-so out of here. And I was like, she was just on task. Yeah. She wasn't ready to hear that information. Sure. And for me, I wasn't ready to hear that response. Yeah. I was like, I am in a bad place. And so to have her dismiss it unintentionally to get what she needed to get done. So I thought one of the big adult moves in my life was to sit with my wife and have a conversation about how much that hurt me. Sure. And she never intended that, but I needed to have that conversation with her. And I think that she just kind of, she saw it coming, but in my mind, that was crazy. It's not me. Yeah. It's not going to be me. It's going to be you. And so to have that drastic jump from A1C 7 to 13 was frightening. And my blood sugar itself was really high. And so I needed to start taking medication immediately. When that didn't help over the course of the next week or two, then I started insulin. And still no true diagnosis of what it was. But one thing was for sure, that the metformin was not getting my blood sugar down. So I had to start doing the injections.
Is metformin, is that a treatment specifically for diabetes? Because I've heard of others taking metformin that don't have diabetes.
Yeah, metformin is specifically for diabetes, but the biohacking community is like, where can I get some diabetes diagnosis?
Longevity.
It is supposed to be like a longevity drug.
Right.
Which for me, I was like, I need to get off metformin. And I was talking to a nutritionist, kind of Oz Garcia. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I was talking to him about it, and he was like, "Oh, take your metformin."
Yeah.
He was like, "Take it anyway. You think you need it or not, just keep taking it. It's good for longevity." And I was
Right.
like, "Yeah." So
I think there are studies coming out that are showing that.
yeah, I think I can't remember exactly. Oh, you got the answer right.
It's
There
Mr.
are
Rogers.
studies coming out about it.
Mr. Rogers coming in now.
So that it's key to, it helps with longevity, but part of that is some of whatever happens metabolically with metformin that allows the body to metabolize sugar or to the muscles to uptake sugar better. So
Interesting.
it's funny that as much research as I've done, I haven't really focused on
It works.
the
That's all you
catalyst
need
of
to
how
know.
the drug actually works.
That's interesting.
But the thing is, ultimately, they put me on 1,000 milligrams twice a day.
Wow.
So with that said, now everything that my children eat suddenly is like, whoa, 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 right? You got to be careful with it. It's stuff that everybody eats.
Right.
All kids tend to eat crappy. And my kids have a relatively good diet. When we see their friends and we're
Yeah.
like, oh, so-and-so got cavities because she eats gummy bears all the time, right? Like, we were like, well, like their teeth are in good shape. They don't eat junk all that. They would if they could,
Sure.
right? But also my kids, especially my boys, are like, oh, these peppers are really delicious. They eat peppers and they eat other. We put peppers in their lunchbox and carrots, and they eat them. They're relatively healthy eaters, but it's when they eat the cereals and the stuff that I'm like, oh, is it because I ate cereal? Is it because of this? And I stopped trying to point at, is it because I did this? There's something strange, and I have it.
Yeah.
Right? Are there things that I can do now to help me be better, to live better and more healthy? Yes, there are, and I actually practiced this in Lent this past year, where I was going metformin free for Lent.
Wow.
So I was going to go off my medication. Did I consult my doctor? Of course not. So I went metformin free.
Educator.
I know, right? So way to go, doc. So what I did was a primarily carbohydrate free diet and regular exercise and regular testing of my blood sugar, probably more regularly than when I'm actually having a diet that has some carbohydrates in it. And I maintained less than 130 as my glucose level on a regular basis, and much lower than that, but I never saw the number above 130 the entire 40 days. So
Wow.
it's doable. People that have type 2 diabetes, it's very doable. But another thing too is if I have a little bit of something, it's like it multiplies in my bloodstream. I don't know what happens. Like it seems like there's more sugar in my blood than should be from eating such a small meal. But I'll also say this: exercise is magical. Like it works wonders for me. I don't know if everybody else does that, but my sensitivity to insulin goes through the roof when I exercise. So it is possible for me to have a meal. And what I try to do, and I think this is important, is like I knew I was coming here and we're going to eat something a little bit, like visit and hang out, and we'll chat and we'll eat. So what I did is I said, I'm going to time restrict my feeding. So I didn't have breakfast today. I know that I'm going to eat something here, so I'll maintain a lower blood sugar level coming into this. I don't think you should starve yourself. That's not the point. I think you should plan out what you're going to do in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So especially when you have a pathology that deals with food, then I can enjoy, like my son's birthday party. His birthday was last month, but we're having his party this weekend. And I'm going to have cake, all right? And I'm not going to increase my dosage or anything like that. I am going to prepare throughout the day to enjoy cake that evening. And then I know that also I'm going to exercise, and my exercise isn't punishment for eating cake. That's not what that is. The exercise is an allowance for me to have that cake. It is an allowance for me to live healthy and better. There's no negative association with me exercising and having something, but there is a correlation between those two. If I'm going to do this, then you better make sure that you allot time for a 30-minute run in the park.
Got it.
And again, not a punishment. It is not something I beat myself up about. It is a lifestyle, just like the lifestyle is when people in your family have a birthday, eat some cake, right?
Absolutely.
But also, I regularly exercise. I don't just try to exercise because I'm having cake, but am I timing that out? I'm scheduling it in. And the other thing too, and you guys know this as fitness educators or fitness professionals too, is that you almost have to schedule things to commit to things. And if you don't schedule it, you don't schedule your meal, you don't schedule your eating, you don't schedule your exercise, then there's a high probability of you finding something else to do or finding something else to eat, and things that you shouldn't be eating because it's not planned out, things that you could and probably should be maybe doing some exercise, but you don't do it because I could stay at work a little bit longer, or I can do this. And we find those excuses because we don't schedule it. We think, wouldn't it be a good idea if I did this one day?
I don't relate to that at all.
No.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So how far down the intermittent fasting road have you gone? Have you tried different styles of fasting? And I mean, so to give you a little background, my experience, I've done the 16-8 paradigm, and I've done the fast mimicking diet, which is a Walter Longo creation,
It's
which
like
is
500 calories a day or less.
Yeah, I think it's even less than that.
Is
it's
it?
like
Okay.
a couple packets of
that,
soup, like maybe like a little like packet of crackers that are like made out of seaweed, or it's like
You're
not
right,
really
yeah.
palatable
Yeah.
food, but like it's something.
Right.
when
Here's a
you're going,
salt lick.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank
when
you.
you're going 5 days, everything. Yeah. So it's like a little packet of olives even, but like that I've done that, but like, obviously the research isn't yet published in humans to show the efficacy of any of these types of fasts quite yet. So I don't think we really know yet like what's most effective, but I was curious to hear from you, since you've had this since type 2 diabetes, like what is that experience like for you?
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the research, because there are a lot of claims that are made with fasting that we're not entirely sure are there yet, or at least currently at the time of this recording that I know of. And one is autophagy or autophagy, which is how your body helps to clean out your system. And that is presumed through fasting to help clean up your system, like to kill off some of the bad things in your body and help clean out your system
Right.
better.
So my understanding of that is that you have a hormone, IGF-1. IGF-1 stimulates cell production in the body. So if you have a lot of IGF-1 in your body, then presumably you're creating a lot of extra cells, which can lead to some forms of cancer. So having a low IGF-1 is generally a good thing. And then they talk about low IGF-1 as well being the catalyst to your body, as opposed to just producing more cells to repair damaged cells and also to break down and recycle cells.
Yeah.
But how do you, I mean, I don't know. To me, I'm a little skeptical of that, because like, how long would you need to go?
Yeah.
Are we talking about 16 hours? Are we talking
No,
about...
they usually talk about the autophagy happening after like 2 or 3 days of fasting. So that's a long time of not
crazy.
eating.
Wow. Yeah.
And I did a 2-day fast or a 3-day fast. I can't remember because I was just hungry the whole time, so I couldn't think. I'm just kidding. Like once you get past the first day, it's not that bad. And also there are these strange euphoric feelings.
Right.
I mean, and it's starting to like get out of the chair to stand up, and it's not like your low blood sugar or low blood pressure where you get dizzy. It was standing up, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, did I just like stand into a weed cloud? This is crazy. This is crazy right now. I feel so high. And it's a strange euphoric feeling, which I think is probably why it's so associated with religions. And
gotcha.
I think there's a correlation between what those would be. So if we look at it, really the only thing that we see in the research, at least as far as I know, is weight loss. And what does the weight loss look like with
that's the
intermittent
danger.
fasting?
That's the danger you get into too, because like I have clients that will do intermittent fasting and they'll do longer fasts, like water fast for an entire week. And
Jeez.
you got to get to a point where you're like, why are we doing this? Because like no one is sticking a needle in your arm and figuring out cell autophagy or IGF-1 or longevity. They're just looking in the mirror and being like, I have just a little bit more fat to burn. So you start dancing a little bit. Like I think any kind of intermittent fasting really walks the line of like an eating disorder, or can.
I mean, it can, and which is why a lot of times registered dietitians, that's not their first go-to. Sure. And there's a meta-analysis that came out recently that showed basically every diet works. Right. And the time-restricted feeding didn't work any better or any worse than any other diet
for weight
loss. Yeah. And so now you look at it and you go, okay, well, why are you doing it? For me, I like it because my blood sugar needs to go down, and I could go without breakfast, right? And I can say, hey, you know what? Before bed, not a great time for me to be having a snack. Right? Because I need to not have blood sugars sitting in my blood as I'm lying in bed, and no way to get any metabolism whatsoever to it. So for me, it's of value. What I was doing, before I was diagnosed, where I refused the diagnosis and ended up hiking up almost twice the level, is I was trying to intermittent fast because associations of weight loss, associations of not having as much regular spikes in insulin, because I knew the more spikes in insulin, the more it would create resistance to it. So I was trying to minimize how many times my insulin would knock on the door and not be paid attention to, right? So if I could minimize that, then maybe Rocky would be happy to see me again. So I tried that, and I think it works for me as a means of diet because I like that. Here's the thing. If I eat breakfast, I'm going to eat second breakfast. I'm going to eat lunch. I'm going to have a snack before dinner, and then I'll eat dinner. Like once I get the ball rolling, for me, I like eating, right? So then I got to look at it and say, okay, well, if I don't start like today, where just before noon when we started recording this podcast, I knew I was coming in. So I restricted my feeding until I showed up here. And now I'm going crazy.
You're right.
Where's the cake?
We're restricting your feeding. On that note, I mean, it's really fascinating. I think one of the things that I just take away is through your diagnosis, through your absolute despair of refusing to accept the diagnosis, it sounds like you learn to communicate better, especially with your spouse. It also sounds like you learn to take ownership and start getting to know you a lot better versus what you just learn in books. But also looking at yourself with humility and finding things that actually helped you progress as a person. What's life like now? I mean, it sounds like we've talked a lot about what you do as far as restricting calories and working out, et cetera, and planning your day. What is it like with your family, with your kids? Now that, because I'm sure that knowing you is you've probably had a conversation with your children as well. Daddy has type 2 diabetes. What does that mean to a child? What does that mean to Levi?
My middle son, Xavier, he's the one at the birthday party coming up, just turned 9. So,
who is the cutest kid, by the way?
Oh my gosh,
and so sweet.
He is
literally should have been named Saint.
Yep, Saint Xavier. Yeah, he saw a commercial for something that's supposed to help type 2 diabetes, and he ran to the kitchen and grabbed a pen and a Post-it note and wrote, I'm going to cry. He wrote down the number and tried to write down the website. And as much as he could spell whatever it was, tried to spell it out so that he could give it to me and it could help me. So that was like, they know. Yeah. They know, and they're just trying to help out.
But they also get invested in it because, which is really nice to see that there is that support.
Yeah.
And while as long as I've known you, you have always been the pillar of your family. Like, it's so nice to see that you've also instilled that in your children to then care and reach out.
Yeah, I don't know if that came from me. Some people have the magic in them already, and the kids are amazing, and they understand it and they don't understand it, right? But they know that I have it. They know that I have diabetes. they've seen me during the time of injections. All they want to do is they either want to inject me or they want to push the button that makes me bleed. When I do my blood sugar, they want to push the button.
Either option sounds
Yeah,
pretty
they
great.
don't care. As long as Dad's being jammed with a needle, they're totally good with it. So, they like some parts of it. They know that it's not good, but they don't know me any different.
Sure.
Like there's no change. There's some things where my wife's from Cincinnati, and very common meal in Cincinnati is chili and spaghetti.
Oh,
So, like Skyline Chili, that's their thing. They're restaurants all over Cincinnati, and that's what they serve: chili on top of spaghetti. Strangely, growing up in Florence, Alabama, my mom's from Nashville. She would make that for us almost every Sunday night. And when a friend of mine was coming over, my younger brother was with me, and he said, "What are we eating?" And I said, "Chili and spaghetti." And he goes, "What?" And my brother goes, he's 4 years younger than me. He goes, "You've never had chili and spaghetti?" And my friend goes, "You're the weird ones here, okay? You're the weird ones." So it's a very common thing. We have it regularly at the house, but Daddy just doesn't get any spaghetti anymore.
Yeah, well, let me make it very clear. That's also a thing in Hawaii.
Is it really?
But it's actually called chili spaghetti.
Chili spaghetti.
Literally, it's on the menu as chili spaghetti.
That's amazing.
And now that we're talking about food, I think we should actually see if there's any other questions, because I can see him drooling. So
Yeah, we got our food coming in now.
Exactly,
I think it's time to eat.
Awesome.
Rick, thank you so much just for making the time. It's interesting because I hear so much of many of your podcasts and conversations that we've had through the years, and I hear a lot of that knowledge coming out, and yet there's so much of a personal nature to this story that is, I don't think the world ever gets to hear. And I think when people hear and when they have diagnoses, it can sometimes be very overwhelming. And as we told you is prior to this, is our hope is always that hearing someone else's story, that someone will find strength and inspiration, and if not solutions to their own situation. But that again is a diagnosis or refusal to accept the diagnosis, and then acceptance is really a step forward and a way to start, progressing on and to move forward in your life, in a new way.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that you can't unbe diabetic, right? Like I can't not be diabetic anymore. Yeah. So the podcast name I think is wildly appropriate. It is a journey now. I don't get to stop it and say I don't have that anymore. It's not like knee surgery, right? Oh, now I have cartilage again or whatever, like a new knee. It's brand new and everything's fine. Everything is fine. But it's fine with the understanding that there is a journey associated with it, and there are going to be struggles and there are going to be ongoing concerns that I try not to concern myself too much with, because you identify the path you're going to walk, you understand the ramifications of your behavior, and you plan out what you need to do in order to most efficiently and effectively take care of, whatever the problems are around, lifestyle and diet and exercise. And I'm trying to do it.
That's
amazing.
So amazing.
Thank you so much. No, thank you so much for coming in, Rick. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And if this is your first time listening to the Journey NYC podcast, please click the subscribe button.
Subscribe button.
Yes, because I need food. So with that, we're going to sign off and say thank you for listening, and we will be back with episode 4.
Take care, guys.